One of the clearest signs that someone occupies an important place in a man's mind is not always found in dramatic gestures or emotional confessions. Often it appears in something much smaller and far more revealing: the way he consistently greets you. Because greetings are emotional reflexes. They happen quickly, instinctively, and with far less calculation than most people realize. When a man greets you warmly every single time, it usually means your presence already carries emotional significance for him long before the interaction even begins. In other words, the warmth you feel in that moment is not created instantly. It's the continuation of thoughts and emotions that already existed before he saw you. This is important to understand because people do not react with genuine emotional enthusiasm toward what feels emotionally neutral to them. Human attention follows emotional priority. The people we think about, value, and emotionally invest in naturally affect our energy when they appear in front of us. That's why a man who constantly thinks about you often reacts differently the moment he sees you. His face softens, his tone changes, his attention sharpens. Even if he was distracted seconds earlier, your arrival shifts his emotional state. And that shift is difficult to fake consistently because it comes from authentic emotional association. Psychologically, this happens because repeated emotional thoughts strengthen emotional anticipation. If someone frequently occupies your mind, seeing them activates emotional reward systems within the brain. Their presence becomes connected to positive feelings, comfort, excitement, curiosity, emotional stimulation. So when he greets you warmly, what you're really witnessing is the emotional continuation of thoughts he has already been carrying internally. And this is why consistency matters so much. Anyone can appear friendly once. Anyone can smile or seem enthusiastic during a single interaction. But when warmth becomes repeated behavior, when he consistently lights up around you, consistently gives you focused attention, then you can see that it's working. Consistently reacts positively to your presence, it reveals emotional investment rather than social politeness. You'll often notice that his greetings feel different from the way he interacts with others. There's more attentiveness in his voice, more intention in his eye contact, more emotional presence in the interaction itself. These subtle differences matter because emotionally attached people unconsciously allocate more energy toward those they deeply care about. What makes this especially revealing is that men often communicate emotional attachment behaviorally before they communicate it verbally. A man may not yet fully admit his feelings, even to himself, but his behavior begins expressing those feelings through repeated emotional patterns. Warm greetings become one of those patterns because emotional excitement naturally seeks expression. There's also vulnerability hidden inside this warmth, because when someone consistently reacts positively to your presence, they are quietly revealing emotional dependence on the connection. Your arrival changes their emotional state. Your attention matters. Your interaction carries emotional value. And perhaps the most important part is that this warmth often appears in ordinary moments, not dramatic ones. That's what makes it honest. It's easy to create emotional intensity during special occasions, but consistent warmth in everyday interactions reflects something deeper and more stable. So when a man greets you warmly every single time, don't dismiss it as meaningless politeness. Pay attention to the emotional consistency behind it. Pay attention to the way his energy shifts naturally around you. Because in the end, people unconsciously reveal what matters to them most. And when someone consistently greets you with genuine warmth, it often means you've already become a meaningful part of their emotional world long before they ever say it out loud. Once you recognize that his warm greeting reflects emotional priority, the next thing you begin to notice is how closely he pays attention to you. Because a man who constantly thinks about you rarely interacts with you casually. He observes, he remembers, he notices details that most people overlook. And this is one of the strongest psychological indicators of emotional attachment. Human beings naturally pay deeper attention to what emotionally matters to them. The mind becomes selective. It filters out what feels irrelevant and focuses more intensely on what carries emotional significance. So when a man remembers small things about you, the way your mood changes, something you casually mentioned weeks ago, your favorite drink, the tone in your voice sets often because you occupy more mental space in his mind than he openly admits. This is why his greetings begin feeling personal rather than routine. He doesn't greet you like he greets everyone else because emotionally you are not everyone else to him. He notices when your energy is different. He notices when you seem tired, quieter than usual, or unusually usually happy. And often he responds to those emotional details instinctively. Psychologically, attention and emotional attachment are deeply connected. When we emotionally value someone, our brain naturally increases awareness around them. We become more sensitive to their behavior, expressions, habits, and emotional state. Not because we are trying to analyze them constantly, but because emotional investment sharpens observation automatically. This is why a man who constantly thinks about you often remembers things you barely remember saying himself. He brings up small details from previous conversations. He notices subtle changes in your appearance or mood. And what's fascinating is that he may not even realize how much attention he's paying to you. Emotional attachment often operates beneath conscious awareness. You'll see this in the way he interacts during simple conversations. He listens carefully instead of waiting for his turn to speak. He asks follow-up questions connected to things you mentioned before. He remembers important moments in your life because emotionally, your experiences have started becoming meaningful to him as well. And this level of attention matters because genuine care always expresses itself through awareness. People make time and mental space for what emotionally matters to them. So when someone consistently notices details about you, it usually reflects emotional presence rather than surface level attraction. There's also vulnerability hidden inside this attentiveness, because the more someone observes and remembers about you, the more emotionally involved they become. Your moods begin affecting them. Your reactions become important. Your emotional state starts carrying influence over their own internal experience. This is where emotional connection quietly deepens, not through dramatic declarations, but through accumulated moments of observation and care. Through someone consistently showing that they see you not just physically, but emotionally. At the same time, this attentiveness creates emotional intimacy. Feeling deeply noticed is one of the most powerful emotional experiences in human relationships. Most people go through life feeling partially unseen. So when someone remembers your small details, notices your emotional shifts and responds with genuine attentiveness, it naturally creates deeper connection. And this is why his warm greetings carry more meaning than they first appear to. They are not isolated moments. They are part of a larger emotional pattern revealing that you occupy his thoughts consistently, even when you're not around. Because in the end, people reveal their emotional priorities through attention. And when a man repeatedly notices the smallest details about you, what he's really revealing is that you are no longer just someone he sees. You have become someone he emotionally carries in his mind long after the interaction ends. As his attention towards you becomes more noticeable, another sign begins revealing itself almost automatically. His entire energy changes the moment you appear. And this shift is important because emotional attachment is not only expressed through words, it's expressed through emotional reaction. You can learn a great deal about someone's feelings by observing how their emotional state changes in your presence. A man who constantly thinks about you often reacts to seeing you in ways he cannot fully control. His face brightens, his posture becomes more engaged, his tone becomes warmer. Even if he was distracted, tired, or emotionally distant moments earlier, your presence suddenly creates a visible emotional shift. And what makes this especially revealing is how fast it happens. Genuine emotional reactions occur instinctively. The mind responds before logic has time to manage behavior. That's why a man who secretly carries strong feelings may unconsciously smile when he sees you, immediately focus his attention on you, or suddenly appear more energized without even realizing it. Psychologically, this happens because emotionally significant people activate emotional reward systems in the brain. When someone occupies your thoughts consistently, seeing them creates a small emotional surge, anticipation, excitement, comfort, emotional relief. Over time, the brain begins associating that person with positive emotional experiences, which is why their presence naturally affects mood and behavior. This is also why emotional shifts are often more honest than words. Words can be carefully chosen. Behavior can sometimes be performed intentionally, but spontaneous emotional energy is much harder to fake consistently. A man may try to appear calm or controlled, yet his excitement still leaks through his expressions, attentiveness, and overall energy around you. You'll often notice subtle differences in how he interacts with you compared to others. Around most people, he may remain emotionally neutral or routine. Around you, there's more life in his reactions, more emotional attentiveness, more genuine enthusiasm. These differences matter because emotionally attached people naturally allocate more emotional energy toward those they care about deeply. And this emotional shift usually becomes consistent over time. It's not one isolated moment, it's repeated behavior. Every time he sees you, there's a similar warmth, focus, or excitement in his response. That consistency reveals emotional investment because emotionally meaningful people repeatedly influence our internal emotional state. There's also vulnerability hidden inside these reactions. Because when someone's energy changes around you, it means your presence affects them emotionally. You have emotional influence over their experience of the moment, and people rarely become emotionally affected by someone they view casually. At the same time, this emotional responsiveness creates a stronger connection between two people. Human beings are naturally drawn toward those who make them feel emotionally alive. So when a man consistently feels happier, lighter, or more energized around you, his attachment often deepens without him even fully understanding why. What's fascinating is that he may not consciously decide to react this way. Emotional attachment develops gradually through repeated emotional experiences. Over time, your presence simply becomes associated with positive emotion in his mind, and eventually his reactions become automatic. This is why you should always pay attention to emotional patterns rather than just verbal expressions. Someone can say all the right things while remaining emotionally disconnected, but genuine emotional excitement reveals itself naturally through consistent behavioral shifts. In the end, when a man's entire energy changes the moment you appear, it usually means something deeper is already happening inside him. Long before love is spoken aloud, the heart often reveals itself through the emotions the body can no longer hide. Once a man's emotional energy consistently shifts around you, another behavior begins to appear very naturally. He looks for ways to keep the interaction going. Because when someone constantly thinks about you, simple connection no longer feels like enough. A greeting becomes an opportunity. A brief conversation becomes something he quietly wants to extend. This is one of the strongest signs of growing emotional attachment because people naturally seek more time with what emotionally fulfills them. Human beings are drawn toward experiences that create emotional reward. So when a man repeatedly tries to prolong moments with you, it often means your presence has become emotionally valuable to him. You'll notice this in subtle ways. First, what begins as a quick greeting suddenly turns into additional questions. He asks about your day even when he could have simply said hello and moved on. He lingers a little longer before leaving. He keeps eye contact going slightly beyond what's socially necessary. Sometimes he even restarts conversations after they naturally begin fading, simply because he doesn't want the interaction to end yet. Psychologically, this behavior reflects emotional investment rather than casual attraction. Casual attraction enjoys moments. Emotional attachment seeks continuity. A man who is emotionally connected to you unconsciously looks for ways to maintain emotional presence because interaction with you creates a positive internal experience for him. And what makes this especially revealing is that it often happens automatically. He may not consciously decide to prolong the interaction. He simply feels drawn toward remaining connected to you a little longer. Emotional attachment subtly changes to behavior beneath conscious awareness. This is why small conversational extensions matter more than people realize. They reveal emotional desire for closeness. A man who constantly thinks about you does not experience interaction with you as routine. Even ordinary moments begin carrying emotional significance, and because those moments feel meaningful, he instinctively tries to stretch them out. You may also notice that he becomes more emotionally engaged during these extended interactions. He asks deeper questions. He becomes more curious about your thoughts, experiences, or emotions. He listens more attentively, because once someone becomes emotionally significant, connection itself becomes rewarding, not just attraction or attention. There's also vulnerability hidden inside this behavior, because prolonging interaction means revealing emotional interest. It means silently communicating, I enjoy your presence enough that I don't want this moment to end yet. And that emotional openness often appears before verbal confession ever happens. What's fascinating is that emotionally attached people often struggle with endings, even small ones. They may find extra reasons to continue talking, delay goodbye, or create future points of connection. This happens because emotional attachment naturally resists emotional separation, even temporarily. At the same time, these extended interactions slowly build emotional intimacy. Familiarity grows through repeated moments of connection. Trust deepens through consistent emotional presence. And over time, what started as simple conversation begins creating a much stronger emotional bond beneath the surface. This is why you should never underestimate small behaviors in relationships. Grand romantic gestures may feel dramatic, but emotional attachment usually reveals itself through quiet consistency, through repeated attempts to stay connected, through someone choosing your presence again and again, even in ordinary moments. Because in the end, people always create more time for what emotionally matters to them. And when a man repeatedly extends interactions, prolongs conversations, and seeks extra moments with you, he becomes more and more dependent on you. He's often revealing something deeper than attraction. He's revealing that being connected to you has already become emotionally important to his life. As these moments of connection continue building over time, something even more important begins to reveal itself: consistency. where genuine feelings separate themselves from temporary emotion. Anyone can appear interested occasionally. Anyone can have one charming conversation, one warm greeting, or one emotionally engaging moment. But real emotional attachment creates patterns. It creates reliability in behavior. A man who constantly thinks about you doesn't just show warmth once when it's convenient. He repeatedly shows it naturally and consistently across time. This matters because consistency is one of the clearest psychological indicators of emotional investment. Human beings naturally repeat behaviors connected to emotional value. If someone genuinely affects your emotional state positively, your attention and energy toward them tend to remain stable rather than unpredictable. That's why a man with growing feelings often greets you warmly every single time, not just when he's in a perfect mood or seeking attention. Even on stressful days, even in ordinary moments, there is still a recognizable emotional shift when he sees you. His attentiveness remains, his warmth remains, his desire to connect remains, and that repeated emotional presence reveals something important. You have become emotionally significant in his inner world. Psychologically, emotionally attached people begin prioritizing certain individuals automatically. The brain allocates more attention, emotional energy, and memory toward those associated with emotional reward and meaning. So when a man repeatedly responds positively to your presence over long periods of time, it often reflects deepening emotional attachment rather than surface-level attraction. This is why patterns matter more than isolated gestures. One romantic moment can be impulsive. One emotional conversation can be situational. But consistent warmth over time is difficult to fake because it requires genuine emotional continuity. It reflects who someone repeatedly becomes around you, not just who they are in exceptional moments. You notice this in small but powerful ways. He continues remembering details about you months later. He consistently checks in emotionally during conversations. His energy remains warm whenever you meet. He repeatedly creates space for interaction even when there is no external reason forcing him to do so. These repeated actions reveal emotional seriousness because emotionally invested people naturally maintain connection. Their effort is not random, it becomes part of their behavioral pattern. There's also a deeper philosophical truth here. Love is not built only through intensity. It is built through repeated emotional presence, through showing up again and again with attention, care, warmth, and consistency. This is what creates emotional safety and emotional trust between two people. And consistency often reveals feelings more honestly than words ever could. Someone can speak beautifully about love while behaving inconsistently, but repeated emotional attentiveness is much harder to manufacture because it reflects authentic internal priority. At the same time, consistency creates vulnerability. The more stable someone's emotional behavior becomes around you, the more emotionally invested they usually are. Your presence begins affecting their routines, emotions, and expectations in subtle but meaningful ways. This is why emotionally attached people often become predictable in the best sense of the word. You know they will light up when they see you. You know they will connect. You know their emotional warmth is real because it continues appearing naturally over time. And in relationships, that reliability is incredibly powerful because trust is not created through dramatic promises, it's created through repeated emotional behavior that remains steady across time. So when a man consistently greets you warmly, consistently seeks connection, and consistently responds to your presence with genuine enthusiasm, pay attention to the pattern rather than isolated moments. Because in the end, temporary traction may create excitement once, but genuine emotional attachment always reveals itself through consistency that quietly refuses to disappear. When you bring all of these behaviors together, the warm greetings, the attention to detail, the shift in his energy, the effort to extend conversations, and the consistency over time, you begin to see a much deeper truth. Before a man openly confesses his feelings, his behavior usually reveals them. First, this is important because emotional attachment rarely begins with perfect words. Most people do not suddenly wake up one day and confidently announce love. Feelings grow gradually, often beneath conscious awareness. And during that process, behavior becomes the first language of the heart. That's why a warm greeting can carry so much meaning. To most people, it may look simple or ordinary, but psychologically, repeated emotional warmth reflects something deeper happening internally. It shows that your presence consistently affects his emotional state. And people are not emotionally affected repeatedly by someone they feel indifferent toward. When a man constantly thinks about you, emotional attachment slowly becomes visible through small patterns. He becomes emotionally responsive to your presence. Your attention matters more to him. Your reactions carry emotional weight. Even brief interactions begin influencing his mood in subtle ways. And this is where many people misunderstand love. They wait only for dramatic confessions while ignoring the emotional patterns already unfolding in front of them. But real emotional connection often reveals itself quietly first, through energy, energy, through attentiveness, through emotional consistency, through the unconscious happiness someone feels simply because you walked into the room. Psychologically, behavior often exposes feelings earlier than language because emotions develop faster than certainty. A man may feel emotionally attached before he fully understands what those feelings mean. He may not yet feel ready to verbalize them, but his nervous system, attention, and behavior begin responding long before logic catches up. This is why emotionally attached people often appear more emotionally sensitive around the person they care about. They become more aware of tone, mood, distance, and connection. A warm response from you affects them positively. Emotional distance affects them more deeply than expected. These subtle reactions reveal that the relationship has already gained emotional importance internally. There's also vulnerability hidden inside these behaviors, because when someone consistently shows warmth and attentiveness, they are exposing emotional investment without directly saying it. They are allowing another person to influence their emotional experience. And that kind of vulnerability rarely exists without genuine feeling beneath it. What makes this especially powerful is that these signs usually appear in ordinary moments rather than dramatic situations. Love often grows through repeated emotional experiences, not sudden cinematic moments. A greeting, a conversation, a smile, a few extra seconds of eye contact. Over time, these small interactions accumulate into emotional attachment strong enough that it can no longer remain hidden. And this is why consistency matters so much more than isolated intensity. Someone can create a romantic moment once, but sustained emotional warmth reveals genuine emotional priority. It reveals who repeatedly occupies someone's thoughts, attention, and emotional energy. At the same time, understanding this changes how you view connection itself. You stop searching only for grand declarations and start noticing emotional patterns. You begin recognizing that love often speaks through behavior first, through the repeated ways someone chooses to emotionally show up for you again and again. Because in the end, before love is ever spoken aloud, it almost always leaves traces behind. In the warmth of a greeting, in the excitement of your presence, in the consistency of attention that quietly says without words, "You matter more to me than you realize."